Will be cloudy and windy, reaching a high of 54. Thursday will also be cloudy and windy with a high of 55. Friday will have intervals of clouds and sunshine with a high of 53. I'm meteorologist Jason Caterina on AM 560, The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Get your tickets for Freedom Summit Chicago 2025, featuring Dr. Ben Carson, Scott Jennings, Mike Gallagher, and many more. Get your tickets today at freedomsummitchicago.com.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here, and Michael Schellenberger, the independent investigative journalist, environmental activist too, who's a few years ago had come back to sanity, which was always nice. Wrote a column about it, wrote a book about it, and he's been doing great work for the last several years, particularly in conjunction with Matt Taibbi and others. The Twitter files, he'll remember. He now has an outlet called Public. He was on with Waters the other night, and I thought he had an interesting perspective on what Trump represents. The first nationalist president of the Fourth Republic, if you will. That's sort of his construct. I'll let him lay out the case.
But we're essentially in the Fourth American Republic. I mean, we're at the end of an 80-year period that began after World War II, and that just so happens that the 1940s was the last time the White House had a significant renovation. So I do think that there is something really I think Democrats are intuiting that there's something really symbolic about what Trump is doing. He's really the first president of a new nationalist era as we say goodbye, as we really end that post-war era of intensive globalization. You know, we're about to be in our 250th anniversary of the United States, or at least the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Basically, you have an 80-year cycle from America's founding to the Civil War, which was really the beginning of a new country. From that moment to World War II was about 80 years, and then from World War II to today is about 80 years. So, politics has got a cycle. It's linear and progressive in some ways, but in other ways it's cyclical. And I do think that you see these are different eras in American history, and as usual, you will see the head of state, a newly elected president, define that new era. And I think that's what Trump is doing, and I think the ballroom sort of shows that. It shows, I think, bringing some grandeur to it. Obviously, Make America Great Again is the slogan of Trump's presidency. I also just think that that's how Democrats are going to have to respond to that. They're going to have to decide whether or not they're going to be sort of a pale imitation of nationalist party, or whether they're going to go in the direction, as you saw there, of socialism. It could end up tearing the Democratic Party apart. It could mean the end of the Democrat Party, and we see something totally new because the left has just been so discredited on every single one of its major issues, from race to border crime, climate change, and transgenderism.
I think the death of the so-called Democrat Party, which is more accurately described as a neo-Marxist party, may be greatly exaggerated, but I think Schellenberger is onto something in terms of the challenge that party has to position itself. So is it going to be the nationalists versus the anti-nationalists? Is that sort of the dichotomy? I think that would play well for the nationalists, although not in urban centers, as we were just discussing. For more perspective on this, please be joined by Ed Morrissey. He's the managing editor of Hot Air, HotAir.com. Ed, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on, Dan. Great to be with you today.
So what do you think about Schellenberger's formulation there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd heard him talk about it a little bit before, and I think that the issue here may be less of eras of 80 years each, but just the fact that there's a difference in the geopolitical world, globally, and we're reacting to that. We're in a very different situation than we were during the Cold War, and I think we've spent the last 30 years trying to figure out what that situation is.
Well, right, but I mean, sort of this common sense counter-revolution that is ongoing right now in reaction to really Biden and Obama with the the interregnum there between Trump's two terms. That does seem to me, America first, nationalist. It does seem to me there is this national anti-nationalist split between the two sides, and you're seeing it play out right now with respect to immigration law enforcement. I mean, and other manifestations too. I mean, Schellenberger mentioned some of these other cultural issues where the other side seems to be in the minority, and that chasm is growing. But I mean, particularly on federal immigration law enforcement, that really does fit into, forget the 80-year sort of time frame, but it just fits into where we are now in terms of that. This is the Nationalist Party, and this is the party that wants to bring revolution to America, turn it into something that it has never been.
I've often thought that what we're in is a post-imperial period. After the collapse in World War I of the imperial order, which kind of continued through the next 30 years or so after that, after kind of needed World War II to settle that, right? I think that the issue is do you still have nation states without empire, or do you have a global government, global world order? And maybe that's the way to look at this. And that fits in with the nationalist issue that you're talking about, which is that I think what you're seeing are forces that are saying, there should be nation states with firm borders, no empires, no colonialism. And on the other end of that spectrum is one world government. We have to unite, and we need a technocracy to run this planet, sort of thing. And I think people are deeply now suspicious of the latter. And nationalism, frankly, is easier to sell. And frankly, I also think it's a better product.
Yeah, I mean, really, the intensity of the other side, as you see, really playing out in New York City, and to some extent, as I said, with respect to the assaults on ICE going on throughout the country, largely in urban centers or metropolitan areas, at least. Boy, it really does seem that party is properly defined as, and I mean, despite their chance of USA on No King's Day, that party is really defined as anti-nationalist, and globalist doesn't even fit either, because they're not really globalists. They're anti-nationalists, they're collectivists, but they're ultimately revolutionaries. They want America to represent the great promise of Marxism. I don't know how else to say it.
Well,
that's what they're doing.
Marxism is a globalist system, though. That's what I'm saying. Is that, and I don't mean globalism in terms of trade. I'm talking about globalism in terms of governance. There's a difference. I'm in favor of free trade and global trade. I have no problem with that. What we're talking though is global governance. And that's Marxism is the system for global governance. In fact, I think it's the only one that would actually work for global governance. And it's a brutal system. It would require the oppression of people around the planet in order to work, because most people want subsidiarity in government. They want government to be accountable, to be closer to them rather than farther away from them, which is the beauty of the American model, which is that it's based on subsidiarity.
Yeah, well, so this is an interesting point, and so then is this where MAGA has to do some course correcting if it is to sustain itself as the preeminent sort of a political movement, which is to say it needs to get more into the business of shrinking the size of government, not just, riffing 10,000 employees so you can spend the money somewhere else. You have to deal with debt. You have to deal with entitlements. You have to shrink the size of government. You have to get government out of the business of things it should never have been in the business of attempting in the first place. And there's not that much appetite for doing that at present.
No, I think what they're doing is they're consolidating gains, right? They're trying to deal with the issue of the border. They're trying to deal with the issue of crime. They're trying to deal with the issues in the urban cores, which is appropriate, and I think that that's good. But I think that as this matures, and hopefully as this continues to progress, they're going to have to figure out a longer-term plan for America, an America built on subsidiarity in governance to work within a planet that is clearly going in the direction of the Marxists. And that's going to be a struggle for us for quite a long time. And again, I think it's all part of this post-imperial world where nobody is really sure what the global world order, I hate that phrase because it's so freighted these days, but nobody's really sure what the global world order is or should be. We're still dealing with the detritus of the imperial age.
Yeah, although I got to say, what Milei is doing in Argentina is very helpful in informing this conversation because he's pushing the envelope of what's possible, and I hope Trump and his progeny, if you will, political progeny, are watching very closely, not just for the narrow purpose of right now and the relationship and getting them dollarized and those things, which are all fine. But I mean, just in thinking about this idea of what should government do and what shouldn't it do? What is our philosophy on government? A necessary evil or a force for good? Because those are two very different premises from which to start.
That's absolutely correct, right? But I think it starts at home. And this is the reason why nationalism, I think, ends up winning, is because it allows you to start at home, right? It allows you to be in a position where you structure your own entity to deal with the wills and desires of the electorate where you're at without having to worry about another group of people 5,000 miles away. And I think that's the reason why the traditional nation-state model is going to end up prevailing, because it just simply is the one that's most responsive to the people who are governed by it. And that's what MAGA has to sort of look at down the road, is how you integrate that into foreign policy, how you integrate that into trade policy. The Europeans screwed it up. They created a European government rather than just a European trading association, which they had. The common market was effective, and they should have stuck with it. Instead, they've created a miniature model of what it would look like to have a global world government, and it's dysfunctional. It doesnst work.
The elections on Tuesday in New York City, Virginia, and New Jersey. So, everybody's focused on if an upset were to happen, like Chitterelli in New Jersey or Sears in Virginia, everybody's focused on, well, what would that mean for the Democrats? Will they pivot, so on and so forth? What if there's no quote-unquote upset? I mean, Chuck Chitterelli came within 84,000 votes 4 years ago. That was pretty close, and that was an incumbent. This is an open seat, and that Mikey Sherrill is not the most impressive candidate I've ever seen. So, in terms of momentum on all these issues, we're winning on all these issues, as sort of Schellenberger was describing, but yet we can't get over the finish line. What happens if we can't get over the finish line with Chitterelli in New Jersey? What's the message that MAGA should take away from that potential occurrence?
Well, I think you have to look at the political environment of these places. They're all three blue areas, right? Virginia's blue. It just is.
Yeah.
Now, Glenn Youngkin won 4 years ago, largely because they tried to run an old corruptocrat and upset the apple cart in Virginia. People didn't like the idea that a former governor was running for another term. Plus, he's Clintonista, and they were tired of that whole establishment. And then you had the parental revolt that was going on at the same time. But Virginia's blue. It has been now for a while. So if Republicans don't win in Virginia, it's because it's a blue state. The same thing is true in New Jersey. It would be remarkable if they won in either one of those places. As far as New York goes, I hear Republicans saying, well, you got to vote for Cuomo. I don't think you vote for Cuomo. Cuomo killed people. I mean, he killed people. He profited off his office. He abused his staff. I think you let New Yorkers have what they want, and then let them deal with the consequences, and let that be a lesson to everybody else, just like you do in Chicago.
100%. 100%. And the other thing, too, that some of these Republicans arguing for the Cuomo vote, I mean, including our friend Hugh Hewitt, but arguing that they miss is, we were just talking about this piece before you joined us, the American Prospect, about how, the base of that party has moved candidates left because they know they have no chance if they don't hew to the orthodoxy. So Seth Moulton, who's challenging Ed Markey for Senate in Massachusetts, I mean, he can't be taking money from AIPAC, and he's not going to anymore. And, so those sorts of things. And there's example after example. The point is to say Andrew Cuomo, who will shapeshift as he needs to win office, to stay in office, to gain popularity, with an eye towards the next rung on the ladder or the comeback, which is where he is now, will say and do anything. And so if the zeitgeist in New York is where it obviously is, then that's what Andrew Cuomo will do. That's those positions he will parrot, those policies he will advance. He is a cardboard cutout human being. He is an empty vessel, just like Kathy Hochul, just like J.B. Pritzker. They will do what they need to do to succeed politically. And to succeed politically, you're going to, in a place like New York City, apparently, you're going to have to be sort of a cheap impersonation of Zoran Mamdani, even if you won.
Exactly. I mean, again, I don't think you get past this without making people feel the consequences of these policy choices, these political choices. And the idea that we have to vote for someone as despicable as Andrew Cuomo to or advocate for that. I'm not voting. I mean, obviously, I don't live in New York, but advocate for that people should vote for Andrew Cuomo, one of the most despicable people in politics, to rescue New Yorkers from themselves is nonsense. You got Curtis Sliwa on the ballot. I know he's kind of an interesting guy, but I like Curtis, and Curtis is at least a legitimate candidate who hasn't, who wasn't responsible for the deaths of thousands of senior citizens during the pandemic, and then lied about it, and then got $5 million for a book that his staff wrote while he was sexually harassing his staff.
Yeah.
I mean,
nice profile. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's just the kind of guy I want to vote for. I mean, it's insane to make that argument. Right.
No, I agree. The immigration enforcement. Quietly you hear some conservatives saying, they really should focus on the 70% that they're already arresting people in this country illegally who have been convicted of a crime or have criminal charges in addition to being here illegally lodged against them. Some of the optics of picking up the restaurant worker or somebody else they happen upon because they're compelled to go into these neighborhoods in sanctuary states aren't good. It's undermining the cause, so on and so forth. What do you think?
What's the cause? Isn't the cause law and order? Isn't the cause enforcing immigration law? These people absconded on deportation hearings. Some of them have been coming in and out of the country, with us chasing deportation orders for several cycles. They are looking for specific people on these things. They're not just hauling people in off the streets, no matter what the media wants to say. And these are people who are in the country illegally. And Donald Trump is demonstrating you can do something about that and resetting all the incentives on that. I don't understand what it is that people thought that ICE did for a living. This is what they do for a living. If you don't like that, change the law so that ICE doesn't have to enforce that. But of course, we're not going to do that because we're not insane. We have a nation state. A nation state has to enforce and defend its borders in order to remain viable. And we've had now several decades of not doing that effectively, and then 4 years of just absolute abdication of those responsibilities. This is what it's going to look like to correct that. I'm fine with that, and if voters don't like that, I get that. But it's necessary. It has to be done, and it serves as a lesson to everybody of what happens when you don't enforce and protect your borders.
Very good. Ed Morrissey, senior managing editor, I should say, of Hot Air, hotair.com. Ed, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
And Ed, join us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer. Salem News Channel is America's fastest growing conservative TV network.
It's an absolute crazy day.
Home to the largest lineup of free speech champions anywhere, delivering in-depth insight and unapologetic opinion on today's biggest news stories.
Americans aren't going to put up with this anymore.
SNC brings you the news that matters